Welcome to today's episode of Eat the Cake, Drink the Wine, and Fuck Dumb People podcast. I am Keisha Noir, your host for this season, as we dive deeper into American history and politics. Some words are updated to be politically correct in today's social media environments from those written and used in the original document or during that time period. Today, we dive into the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence, that shining beacon of liberty, that bold declaration to the world that all men are created equal, equal in their rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the very foundation of the American experiment, a rallying cry against tyranny and oppression, and yet it is incomplete. When Thomas Jefferson sat down to draft these immortal words, he wrestled with a glaring contradiction. He knew, as many knew, that the ideal of freedom was compromised from the very beginning. You see, Jefferson himself owned hundreds of indentured servants, as did many of the founding fathers. The very hands that penned the Declaration of Independence belonged to a man who oversaw the labor of other human beings. He was all too aware of the hypocrisy. In an early draft of the Declaration, Jefferson did something remarkable, something bold. He included a passage that directly condemned King George III for perpetuating the trade of indentured servitude. Jefferson wrote, "He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into indentured servitude in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable unalivement in the transportation thither. This piratical warfare, the opprobrium of infidel powers, is the warfare of the Christian king of Great Britain, determined to keep open a market where men should be bought and sold. He has exploited his authority for suppressing every legislative attempt to prohibit or to restrain this execrable commerce. And that this assemblage of horrors might want no fact of distinguished dye, he is now exciting those very people to rise in arms among us, and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them, by unaliving the people on whom he also obtruded them, thus paying all former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with crimes which he urges them to commit against the lives of another." Imagine that. Jefferson, Jefferson himself called out servitude as a cruel war against human nature. He was condemning not only the practice itself, but also the British king for perpetuating this exploitative trade. He labeled it an assemblage of horrors. And yet, this fiery denunciation never made it into the final draft. Why? Why would a passage so clear, so morally direct, be removed? The answer, as always, lay in compromise. The southern colonies, South Carolina, Georgia, and others, were built on the back of indentured servitude. Their economies depended on this labor. These delegates, fearful of losing their livelihood, refused to sign a document that openly condemned the institution they relied upon. The northern colonies, though less reliant on indentured servitude, were not entirely free from the practice either. The pursuit of unity, a fragile, necessary unity, trumped the pursuit of justice for those in indentured servitude. And so the passage was struck from the final version, as if those words had never been written. And what was left? What was left was all men are created equal, but not the indentured servants. They weren't created equal. Not the indigenous peoples who were seen as obstacles to westward expansion. They were not created equal. Not the women who were denied basic rights, and certainly not the poor white men that did not own property, whose voices in government were just as restricted. They were not created equal. The Declaration, for all its noble ideas, was written in the language of liberty, but left many in chains of a different kind. It did not challenge the social order of servitude, indentured servitude, that is. It did not challenge the colonial mindset that treated entire groups of people as lesser beings. And yet, in time, those words, all men are created equal, will become the very tools that abolitionists like Frederick Douglass would wield against the nation's hypocrisy. They would become the rallying cry for a civil war that would finally bring an end to involuntary servitude, indentured servitude, nearly 90 years later. That's almost a century, people. But in 1776, the reality was far from that lofty ideal. The colonies sought independence, yes, but only for some. The leaders of the revolution had to balance their vision of a new nation against the economic and political interests of the southern colonies. To preserve unity, they turned a blind eye to the great moral injustice of their time. The Civil War, when it came, was inevitable. This unresolved tension between freedom and indentured servitude had always been lurking in the shadows, waiting to erupt. And the promises of the Declaration would not be fully realized until much later, with the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 and the 13th Amendment in 1865, abolishing indentured servitude in its most brutal forms once and for all. But even then, the question remained, were all truly equal? The debate continues, echoing through the halls of history, as each generation returns to these words, hoping to find the promise of liberty fulfilled for everyone. Jefferson's words still resonate, though incomplete. His pen was guided by both idealism and contradiction, by hope and by the harsh realities of his time. And so we look back with a mixture of admiration and disappointments, knowing that the struggle of true equality did not end with the signing of the Declaration. It was only the beginning. But what else was the beginning? What else was the beginning as these rebels, as they were referenced during that time frame, came together? 50 delegates came together from the 13 colonies, and they were considered to be the Continental Congress, with likes such as Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. They all came together for this high treason debate in order to obtain freedom from Great Britain. They all wanted independence. So in a 5-to-1 ratio vote of success, because some of the 50 that were there said, hey, we're not going to pull this off. Like, we're not going to be able to come over this army. Like, they're going to pulverize us. But some of them said, no, we got this. We can do this. So they decided to move forward. And July 4th, 1776 is when the Declaration of Independence was penned that said, all men are free and equal, and endowed by their Creator of inalienable rights. The Creator would be God. That means God created us all free and equal. And yet, the penning of the Declaration of Independence was only the beginning of the freedom for all. That concludes today's episode. I am Keisha Noir, your host for today. I want to thank you for your continued engagement and interaction in the content. Please continue to like, please continue to comment, please continue to share, but most of all, please continue to subscribe. It lets me know that you are interested in this content and gives me the air that I need beneath my wings as I continue to research and verify the American historical facts. As we prepare on our field trip to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., to actually look at these American factual artifacts, to look at the maps, to look at the letters, to look at the photographs. But it also lets the platforms know that there are people interested in the historical facts of the United States of America. And it will push that content out to those people that would like to engage and interact with the contents. Until next time, have an abundance-filled, high vibrational day. Love you. Bye.